comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government.
Hank Sauer, 37 years with the Giants, 57 years in baseball. Nice to see you, Hank.
That's a pleasure.
All right. A few things about Hank Sauer, 1952 National League MVP. 6 years, over 30 home runs, over 41-year dominating slugger in the early 60s with the Cubs, in the early 50s with the Cubs. Later went on, and this is what we started to talk about, to be a member of the last New York Giant team that played in New York. In 1957, in 1958, they came out and played in San Francisco, and you bridged the gap. You played on both teams.
I played on both of them.
Tell me about the 57 Giants.
I finished up. I started out with them, and I was in spring training with them, and I was having a terrible spring. Well, of course, I was up in age too, and I figured, well, they'll use me periodically. And I started out, and I told Bill Rigney, I said, Bill, I'm a terrible starter in spring training, which I always have been. I was hitting maybe 210, 220 every year. I don't care what club I was with, even when I was younger. I started out that way. And in fact, I think that's what held me back from getting to the big leagues sooner than I should have gotten there. And being put in the minor leagues, I've been in the minor leagues for 7.5 years. But that was the big factor, is that I always got off to a bad start. Well, Bill believed me. He told me, thank you, told me, and I said, and I'm going to believe you. So we're going back, and I think we got as far as Baltimore. We played Baltimore on the way back to New York. And
Coming up from spring training.
Come back from spring training, and that's actually when I started hitting. Well, then he could see it coming. Well, then I opened up the season with him, and I went through the year, and which that year I had the comeback player of the year.
26 home runs?
26 home runs. It was 26, broken over 86 runs.
Played with Red Sanders.
Well, I had Willie Mays hitting in front of me.
Right.
I hit fourth, he hit third, and it was now Willie's trying to catch up to me.
Right. That's right.
So Bill said, "Hank, I'm going to have to set you out. You're putting too much pressure on this guy." I said, "Wait a minute, this is a kid that I know that can stand pressure." So I sat out for a little while anyway, and he had a great year that year, and I had a pretty good year with a comeback player.
Right. Your prime was with the Cubs.
But then after, the Cubs was, that was actually, I would think, was my greatest years was with the Cubs.
Right. You played next to a fellow who was, I thought, one of the most underrated players of his time, Frankie Baumholz.
Oh, boy. He really was. When we left Cincinnati, they traded us from Cincinnati to Chicago, Frankie Baumholz and myself, for Harry Walker and Peanut Flowery. So we went over there, and on our way over, what a rough trip we had. It's not a long trip, but what a rough trip. So we go over there, and Frankie Frisch, for some reason, didn't take a liking to Frank. Of course, I don't know.
It's unusual because he was a real Frankie Frisch type player.
He was a tough player and a hard out.
Yeah.
Didn't strike out too much at all. In fact, when he left, I had very few people in front of me to hit because Pafko hit behind me. I hit fourth, and then I didn't have too much in front of me.
Right.
It still drove in over 100 runs those years. But
then Ernie Banks comes up.
That's when Ernie Banks came in, and he came in, I think it was in 51 or 52. I'm not.
Maybe a year or so later.
It was one of those 2 years there. And the first year, I think 52 he came in. That's when I had my MVP here. And he came in, and boy, he just caught fire right away. He could swing a bat.
What a personality.
And one of the nicest guys I think was ever put in the baseball uniform.
Yeah. Just wanted to play two today, no matter what day it was.
He was outstanding. He was every day he'd come in, boy, it's a great day for two. That was his favorite thing.
You got to tell me about Frankie Frisch. Any stories of
Frankie Frisch? Let me tell you, was a tough guy on young kids. And if you fought back with him, he liked you. He hated somebody that would shy away from him once he got mad. He could get mad pretty quick, and he'd call you anything in the books. There's no today a player could never play for this man.
Right.
There's no way they could play for him. He'd get up there, he'd read the riot act, he'd go from locker to locker. You should be a shoe-shine boy. You should be a guy that works in a clothing store, and you should be. That's the kind of guy. I'm talking about one locker to the next. Well, I was having some pretty good years. He's going through this section. He come over to me. He says, and he went to the next one.
Right. That had to make you feel pretty good.
It did make me feel good.
Yeah.
And the day he got fired, I would never forget it. It was in Philadelphia, and I think he may have a few drinks. He was red-faced. I went back and says, "Frankie, you all right?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Those kids just couldn't take me, Hank." He says, "I only had one player on a ball club." He said, "That was you." And he said, "The rest of them were all kids, and they had me fired." So that's when he left a year afterwards.
Who took over after him?
Bob Sheffing took over after him.
Okay. Just curious, did that turn things around, or
no,
it was a much more low-key approach at that point?
Actually, it didn't. There wasn't much of a change at all. Because our ball club is just, as far as I'm concerned, was just a mediocre ball club. Our pitching staff was just average. We had Big Bob Rush, which was our best pitcher. We had Turk Lon, which was just a below 500 pitcher. In fact, every one of our pitchers was a little bit below. In our ball club, we had no leadoff man. We had Frankie hitting. Frankie was our best leadoff man. Frankie was our leadoff. But after that, we didn't have much after that.
This sounds a lot like my fantasy league baseball team this year, the California Sauer. Talk about that another time. Sometimes if you got nothing, you got nothing. And unfortunately, you didn't play with great Cub teammates, but you did play with great Cub fans. Tell me about those folks. The
fans, and like I said before, the fans in Chicago, they know the game. And they were great. And, in fact, I was a tobacco chewer at the time. I think I chewed tobacco for 50-some years.
Wow.
And every time I go out to left field, there'd be one packet thrown to me. If I hit a home run, I was showered with it. And we never had a bite of tobacco in Chicago. I mean, all the ball players, they'd go to my locker. The locker was full of tobacco. Then they had a day for me, I think, in 1953. When I went out in the field, the whole outfield was full of tobacco. It took us, we had to stop the game. It took us at least a half hour to an hour to pick all the tobacco up. It went into my locker, and Yosh Kawana, which was our clubhouse man, he'd stack it in there. And when the season's over, he was a chewer too. He took it all home. He's had enough tobacco, Hank, for 5 years after it got through with you.
He must have had stories, Gabby Hartnett and the like.
Oh, boy. You know, actually, I don't think anybody knows how old Yosh Kawana is. He's still the clubhouse boy over there.
Is that right?
Oh, sure. I would say he's been in baseball for, 50 years. I bet you he was 57 years. I bet you he's in there the same amount of time.
You suppose he had a baseball age, too?
I would have to agree with you. I bet so. I have to agree with you. He's a good kid. There's nothing. In fact, one year that he stayed in the same apartment, I said, "Come on and live with me for a while." So he stayed with me for 1 year. He and I were real close friends.
Players of your day, Ralph Kiner. Now, you guys went up against each other for years.
Well, we played against one another when he was at Pittsburgh. He had a lot of power.
Yeah.
And a nice guy. But now when he's traded over to us in Chicago, he was traded from Pittsburgh to Chicago. And then when he was with us, he went out to left field, and the first thing he got was a couple of tobacco thrown at him. Well, the worst thing he could have done is what he did. He picked it back up and threw it back in the stand. Well, that was the worst thing he could.
Yeah.
That was it.
Even if he didn't smoke tobacco or chew tobacco.
He never chewed tobacco, but he should have never thrown it back.
Exactly.
That was his downfall. And from then on, they never let up on him. So finally, the following year, they had to get rid of him.
Yeah. You were talking about Smalley, too, another player that the Cubs just were down on. Cub fans were just down on right from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, he loafed one time to first base. And his first base loafing cost him to get out of there because they just, as soon as he stuck his foot out on that ball field, before the game started, they started booing him.
One of the most intense rivalries of those days were the Cubs and the Cardinals. And when you left the Cubs, that's where you went.
That's
the
right.
Cardinals. Now, off-season, what were you thinking? What was the adjustment from a player leaving one team to another?
You hate to do it. I know when I left Cincinnati to go to Chicago, I hated to do it. But when I got to Chicago, I thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Then when I was traded from Chicago, after having all those good years, to St. Louis, the only thing that really, Stan Musial and I were close friends at all times. We're both of us in Pittsburgh. And when he come in, he says, "You're my roommate." He said to me, I said, "Who said I was going to room with you?" He said, "I did." Well, when that man says something, you just listen to him. But if there's a finer person on this earth, I want to know who they are. This man is one of the greatest people and the best person I've ever known in my life.
What an athlete, too.
Oh.
Started out as a pitcher.
I hurt his arm. I went to the outfield and started hitting and never stopped.
Yeah. 43 and went out hitting 20 home runs.
He was never a real impact home run hitter, but he was always qualified to hit one.
And run. He had a lot of speed early on.
He could run. Well, I say speed puts at least 20 to 30 points on your batting average. I honestly believe if I could have run, it was the same type of runner that Stan or anybody could run, I don't think I'd ever hit less than 300. Because a lot of times they had the ball to shortstop, he'd knock it down, pick it up, and throw me out, or second base, same thing.
When you were coming up as a youth league player, you knew you were always at the top of your class. Am I correct? You were a superstar all the way up. To have gotten to the minors, you excelled at the levels that preceded that. Am I correct?
Well, when I was in the minor leagues, like I said, like we were talking about before, they had at least, I think, Cincinnati. Well, I was with the Yankees first, and the Yankees had at least 20 minor league clubs, and they're grooming me to take over for Lou Gehrig in those times because Lou Gehrig was starting to get a little old, and I was supposed to take his place.
With the Yankees?
Well, with the Yankees.
I thought Cincinnati was the first place.
No, then Frank Lane, which was their head scout with Cincinnati, he told them that they were going to draft me. I don't care where they put me, they were going to draft me. Well, the Yankees, instead of putting me in AAA, they put me in A ball, the high A ball,
right,
which was Binghamton. Well, then Frank Lane took me into Birmingham, which is A1. You always had to get one step higher. And so I went, that's when I went in with Cincinnati. And then I went up to, I had a good year in Birmingham, and I went to Cincinnati the second year, which I had 336, and never even had a chance in Birmingham. In Cincinnati. So now he says, we're going to send you down, we're going to make an outfielder out of you. So when I went up there, they said, you're going to left field. I said, I never played left field. I was first baseman my whole career in the minor league. You're going to the outfield. So I go up there, and he says, we got a guy that's making he's the highest paid salary man in baseball, Frank McCormick. He was making $17,000. That was the highest.
The highest.
Right. That was the highest.
Are you ever galled by any of that?
You mean today?
Yeah,
No.
Today. Just absolutely galled to think that you exceeded where 20 guys, just to get to your level at the big leagues, you came over 20 teams. You skipped the rope over 20 teams.
Right.
And to be MVP and to topped out in the 30s, maybe low 40s, your salary in the 50s.
No, 50s. I'll tell you what it was. $37.5. That was my top salary. I never had a chance. And this is it.
Right.
I hit 41 home runs in 1954. 41 home runs, drove in 100 runs, and I got a contract for a $1,500 cut in salary. I write back to him and say, hey, you sure you sent this contract to the right person? Yeah. We could have had fifth place without you. I said, but you wouldn't have drawn 1 million people without me.
Right. They did lose sight of that, and I think that, like we're talking about with Kurt Flood, with Jeffrey McIntyre,
right.
I think that basically the pendulum was so swung to that side that the way it is today is merely an overreaction, and it's gone to the player side, and the whole house of cards could come tumbling down very, very easily.
True.
And if things weren't so bad for the players of your day, tell us about the early days of the pension program.
Was it
$3 a day? Or?
Now that you brought that up,
right.
See, the pension plan, when we first started in 1947, I was part of it, and I was represented with the Cubs. But in 1947, we started. We had to put in $500 to start. So we put it in. But now, every month, now when it went through, Kurt Flood was probably the big responsibility. Him and Sauer Magley. They jumped to Mexico.
Right.
And this is what started us on the pension. Now, we started out, a 20-year man would have got $100 a month. Well, we thought that was a lot of money. Those
inflation all that time, but
now the pension plan was going up, and then all of a sudden now, when I quit in 1959, 1960 was my first year out, and that's when your pension stopped. Now, that every time they went back to pick up some players, they go back 10 years. So 59 put me into that pension plan, which was, I think, $500 now a month. So now we go there. I don't begrudge it but we had to pay monthly. We had to pay into that pension plan. Today they don't pay nothing.
Right, it comes out of all-star revenue.
We were a 20-year man was a pension man. That's when you were as far as you could go, 20 years.
Right.
That was when it stopped. Today, your full invested member is 10 years. Ours was 20. Now it's 10. Now, if you're making $1 million, you get I think $109,000 or $110,000 a year. Now we didn't even come close. Why does a millionaire need $110,000? It's $110,000. That's a lot of money.
Right. Well, they have been semi-generous in going back to the players.
But they don't. A little bit.
Yeah.
They give us a little touch of cream once in a while. But we did.
The one nice thing they do is bats through the Major League Player Association. Bats being the organization of.
It's tremendous.
Yeah.
This is outstanding.